Sarah hummed happily to herself as she strolled into the office. "Good morning, everyone," she greeted her coworkers cheerfully. A few grunted in reply while others just stared at their computer screens, already absorbed in the day's tasks. Undeterred, Sarah headed to her cubicle and sat down, determined to make it a productive and positive day. She had been focusing intently on developing an optimistic mindset lately, and while it was still a work in progress, she could feel the subtle shifts in her outlook and demeanor. The little annoyances and stresses of daily life no longer consumed her thoughts. She was learning to let things go more easily. As she scanned through her emails, Sarah's eyes landed on one from her boss requesting an impromptu meeting in 30 minutes to discuss an important matter. In the past, such a vague and last-minute summons would have sent Sarah into an anxious tailspin, imagining all sorts of terrible scenarios. Was her job in jeopardy? Had she made some huge mistake on a recent project? But the new Sarah took a deep breath and reframed her thinking. "I'm sure it will be fine," she reassured herself. "I've been doing good work and there's no reason to assume the worst. I'll walk in there with confidence." She spent the next half hour calmly preparing a few talking points to have at the ready. When Sarah stepped into her boss's office, she was greeted with a warm smile. "Sarah, thanks for making the time to meet. I wanted to let you know that I'm very impressed with how you've been handling the Halston account. The client called me personally to sing your praises. I think you're ready to take on more responsibility, so I'd like to offer you a promotion to senior account manager." "Congratulations." Sarah was momentarily stunned but quickly recovered. "Wow, thank you so much. I'm honored by the opportunity and vote of confidence. I won't let you down." She walked out of the office on cloud nine, amazed at the unexpected turn of events. "See, positivity pays off," Sarah thought to herself with a grin. She couldn't wait to share the good news with her family and friends. On the drive home that evening, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed in the past year, since she began her journey of self-improvement and positive thinking. She used to be consumed by worry, self-doubt, and pessimism. Every obstacle or setback would send her into a funk for days. Her relationships suffered, her work performance was mediocre, and she had little direction or motivation. The turning point came when Sarah's beloved grandmother passed away after a long illness. At the funeral, people kept coming up to Sarah to share stories about how her grandmother had touched their lives with her kindness, generosity, unwavering optimism, and faith. Even in her final difficult days, she never complained and always found something to be grateful for. Sarah was struck by the profound legacy her grandmother had left and the number of lives she had brightened. At that moment, Sarah resolved to be more like her grandmother, to choose happiness, to have faith, to spread more light than darkness in the world. She wanted to make her grandmother proud. So Sarah immersed herself in books and podcasts about positive thinking, mindfulness, and personal development. She started a daily gratitude journal, logging at least 5 things she was thankful for each day. When negative thoughts crept in, she would counter them with empowering affirmations. Meditation became an essential part of her morning routine, helping her stay grounded. Slowly but surely, Sarah could feel herself changing from the inside out. Her confidence grew, her relationships deepened, and exciting new opportunities seemed to manifest out of thin air, like her promotion today. She knew her transformation was still in its early stages, but she was committed to staying the course. As Sarah arrived home, she was greeted by her boyfriend Chris. "There's my rising superstar," he exulted, pulling her into a big hug. "I'm so proud of you, babe. I knew that promotion was inevitable. You've been working so hard and your positive attitude is infectious." "Ah, thanks, love," Sarah said, planting a kiss on his cheek. "It really is amazing how much can change when you change your mindset. I feel so much lighter and happier." "Well, you definitely make me happier," Chris said with a playful grin. "What do you say we celebrate this milestone over dinner? I'm thinking we recreate our first date at that little Italian place." "That sounds perfect," Sarah agreed. She paused and looked at Chris intently. "I hope you know how much I appreciate you. I wouldn't be where I am today without your support and encouragement. I love you." "I love you too," Chris said, his eyes shining with adoration. Now, go get dolled up while I make us a reservation. Tonight is all about you. At the restaurant, in between bites of gnocchi and sips of red wine, Sarah and Chris laughed as they reminisced about the early days of their relationship. Remember when I spilled my drink all over the table on our second date? Chris said sheepishly. I was so embarrassed I almost didn't call you again. But aren't you glad you did? Sarah teased. Best decision you ever made. They both laughed. Then Chris's expression turned serious, and he reached across the table to take Sarah's hands in his. Seriously though, I am so incredibly happy with you and so excited about our future. Seeing how much you've grown and changed this past year has been amazing. You inspire me to be better. I love doing life with you and can't imagine it any other way. Tears pricked the corners of Sarah's eyes as she squeezed Chris's hands. I feel the same way. You're my person and my biggest inspiration. Here's to many more celebrations and milestones together. They raised their glasses in a toast, both beaming with joy and anticipation for all that was to come. The next morning, Sarah awoke to the sound of birds chirping outside her window. She stretched and smiled as memories of the previous evening washed over her. Reaching for her gratitude journal on the nightstand, she scrawled down a few lines. I am thankful for my incredible boyfriend Chris and our deep love, for my promotion at work and chance to make an even bigger impact, for the positive changes I'm seeing in myself and my life. I am thankful for sunshine and birdsongs to start the day and for my health and vitality. Setting down her pen, Sarah took a deep cleansing breath and felt her heart swell with appreciation and contentment. It's going to be a great day, she whispered, and indeed it was. Sarah's transformation didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't always smooth sailing. There were still moments of doubt, frustration, and negativity, but she was learning to reframe challenges as opportunities for growth. Instead of saying, "Why is this happening to me?" she would ask, "What is this trying to teach me?" When Sarah's car broke down on the way to an important client meeting, leaving her stranded on the side of the highway, her initial reaction was panic and catastrophic thinking. I'm going to be late and they're going to be furious. I'll probably lose the account over this. Why do things like this always happen at the worst time? But then she caught herself and took a few deep breaths. Okay, let's look at this differently, she coached herself. I can't control the situation, but I can control my response to it. I'll call the client and calmly explain the situation, then call a tow truck. In the meantime, I'll use this time while I wait to do some big picture brainstorming for the account. Who knows? Maybe I'll come up with some new, creative ideas. I refuse to let this ruin my day. And that's exactly what she did. The client was very understanding about the delay, and Sarah ended up bringing some fresh thinking to the meeting that impressed everyone. What could have ruined her day ended up being a win. As Sarah continued to build up her positivity muscles, she began noticing how good energy seemed to attract more good energy. Positive people and exciting opportunities were drawn to her like moths to a flame. Her newfound radiance was impossible to miss, and everybody wanted to bask in her glow. A powerful example of this occurred on the 1-year anniversary of her grandmother's passing. Still grieving but determined to honor her grandmother's memory, Sarah organized a day of service at the local retirement community where her grandmother had lived. She recruited friends and co-workers to volunteer, and they spent the day assisting the residents with small tasks, playing games, sharing meals, and spreading some cheer. The residents were overjoyed by the company and care. One woman clasped Sarah's hand with tears in her eyes and said, "You filled my heart today, dear. You remind me so much of my own granddaughter. Thank you for taking the time to brighten the day of an old woman." Sarah's own eyes grew moist. "It is my absolute pleasure. I lost my grandmother last year, and being here with all of you makes me feel close to her. She taught me everything I know about kindness and finding joy in the little things." As Sarah and the woman chatted and laughed together, Sarah felt a tug on her sleeve. She turned to see one of the facility administrators, who smiled warmly. "I just had to come over and thank you for putting this whole day together. The residents are absolutely glowing, and the ripple effect of the love you've brought here today will last for weeks. We would love to discuss the possibility of having you and your friends come back to volunteer regularly. You're clearly a special soul." Sarah's heart soared. What started as a way to honor her grandmother had blossomed into something even bigger, a meaningful way to give back and an opportunity to uplift more lives. She had a feeling her grandmother was smiling down at her. The next endeavor Sarah excitedly poured herself into was training for a half marathon to raise money for a local domestic violence shelter. She had never been much of a runner before, but was determined to push herself out of her comfort zone for a good cause. The symbolism of moving her body forward to help women take steps into new lives free of abuse really spoke to her. Sarah began waking up at 5 a.m. to train before work, gradually building up her endurance. There were many mornings she wanted to hit snooze and stay in bed, but she would conjure up the faces of the brave survivors who were counting on her fundraising. That was all the motivation she needed to lace up her shoes and hit the pavement. As she shared her training journey and the stories of the women she was running for on social media, the donations started pouring in. Friends, family, colleagues, even perfect strangers were moved by her dedication and passion. The shelter staff were astounded by how much she was able to raise. On race day, Sarah was bubbling with nerves and excitement as she lined up at the start line in the chilly dawn air. She thought about how far she had come, not just in her physical training but in her emotional and spiritual growth. For the woman she was a year ago, this kind of challenge would have seemed impossible. But the woman she was today knew she was limitless. With a burst of adrenaline, Sarah took off as the starting gun fired. She found her rhythm and broke into a huge smile as her feet pounded the pavement. The race course wound through the city, with spectators lining the streets to cheer on the runners. Sarah high-fived the kids who stuck out their hands, soaking in the lively, encouraging energy of the crowd. As she rounded the corner for the final stretch, Sarah could see the finish line in the distance. Her legs were burning and her lungs were heaving, but a second wind of determination kicked in. This is for the women finding their strength again. For my grandmother who always believed in me. For the new me who knows I can do hard things. Sarah repeated like a mantra as she sprinted the last quarter mile. Crossing that finish line was one of the proudest moments of Sarah's life. Sobs of elation mixed with exhaustion racked through her body as a volunteer draped a medal around her neck. She had done it, not just completed the race, but risen to the challenge of reshaping her life. Chris was waiting for her at the end with the biggest proud smile on his face and tears in his eyes. "You are amazing," he murmured into her sweaty hair as he wrapped her into a bear hug. "I am in awe of the woman you have become. You just radiate passion and positivity. This is only the beginning for you, love." In the weeks following the race, Sarah was flooded with thank you messages from the shelter staff and residents. They invited her to come tour the new children's play area that her fundraising would finance. Walking through the shelter halls and seeing the hope returning to these women's eyes, Sarah was deeply humbled. Her heart broke and soared in equal measure. As she headed home from the shelter visit, an idea crystallized in Sarah's mind. A vision for her next chapter and calling. She knew with unshakable clarity that she was meant to help more women rebuild their lives. The stirrings of a nonprofit to assist survivors with education, employment, housing, and empowerment started mapping themselves out in her mind. That night over dinner, Sarah shared her inspiration with Chris, who was instantly on board. "I think you have found your purpose, babe. This is what you are meant to do. I will support you every step of the way and can even help with the business plan. I'm so excited for you and all the lives you are destined to change." And so the plan for Radiant Beginnings was born. Sarah, who had once felt so lost and powerless in her own life, had found her ultimate power in uplifting others. All the positive changes she had experienced were simply preparing her for this mission. She worked tirelessly on developing the nonprofit, rallying volunteers, finding donors and partners, filing paperwork. The days were long and some doubted if she could really pull it off. But Sarah never wavered in her faith and optimism, even when the obstacles seemed insurmountable. Her resolve to be a force for good could not be shaken. 6 months to the day from her shelter visit, Sarah held a ribbon-cutting ceremony for Radiant Beginnings' first transitional home for survivors. As she addressed the crowd of supporters, survivors, and press, Sarah radiated pure joy and purpose. "Today we celebrate new beginnings. We celebrate the unshakable strength and resilience of these women. We celebrate the power we all have to lift each other up and be light in the darkness. Radiant Beginnings exists to honor that light and ensure that no woman ever feels alone on her journey to freedom, healing, and empowerment. Together, we will break cycles and rebuild lives. Together, we will shine. As Sarah looked out at the faces of the women Radiant Beginnings would serve, women who had endured unthinkable pain but still dared to hope, she once again felt her grandmother's presence. A warmth embracing her, a peace filling her soul. This is what she was meant for. This was her radiant beginning and radiant becoming. In shining her light, she would ignite the light in so many others. The legacy of love her grandmother instilled in her would ripple out and touch generations. With a heart full of gratitude and eyes sparkling with happy tears, Sarah cut the ribbon to whoops and applause. A new chapter was beginning for the survivors, for Sarah, and for the world made better by Radiant Beginnings. As she stepped forward into her calling, Sarah knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth or easy, but she also knew she would greet each day with hope, faith, and a commitment to being a force for good. For that was the ultimate power, and she was just getting started.